Question 5.
What documents do I need to adopt from Andorra? According to adoption officials in Andorra, you should check at the time of your intended adoption with the adoption authority in this country for the exact required documents. And now, I will present you the basic documents American prospective adoptive parents need when adopting in a foreign country that permits international adoptions. This overview is about 13 minutes long. American prospective adoptive parents will need two sets or groups of documents when they adopt in a foreign country in order to satisfy both U.S. federal immigration law and the laws of the child's country of birth. The first set of documents is necessary for the U.S. Embassy consulate in the foreign country to be submitted after the completion of your adoption in that country, and a different set of documents will be required by the adoption authorities in the foreign country in order to satisfy the requirements, laws, and procedures set forth by the foreign government. Do not forget that all documents must be in legal form and translated by authorized and sworn translators, both for the foreign authorities as well as for the U.S. Embassy visa interview. Remember that you should always keep extra copies of all your documents. Let's talk about the basic documentary requirements set forth by the U.S. Embassy in the foreign country, and after that we'll look at the general documentary requirements set forth by adoption authorities in the foreign country. This is just a general overview, and you should check directly or with the aid of your adoption service provider for the exact documents, number of copies, fees, and so on at the time of your adoption process. You should also check with the U.S. consulate in the foreign country before completing your adoption locally if that particular orphan will be recognized as a true legal orphan under U.S. laws. This way, you will not have any surprises. There are three basic steps in preparing and submitting documents for the U.S. Embassy. 1. Parents file Form I-600A in the U.S. before identifying the orphan to speed up the process and get approvals for the parent's documentation. 2. Parents file Form I-600 at the U.S. Embassy consulate in the foreign country after the completion of the adoption with foreign authorities. And 3. Parents sign Form I-600 in front of the U.S. consul and submit the last batch of documents before paying the visa fees and receiving the approval from the U.S. consular officer. Now, each of the three steps in more detail. Step 1. Parents file petition I-600A in the U.S. on behalf of the prospective adoptive orphan to be recognized as an immediate relative. The 8 basic documents required for submitting the I-600A form are: 1. Completed Form I-600A, application for advanced processing of orphan petition. 2. Fingerprints of each prospective adoptive parent taken at a local USCIS office. 3. Proof of the prospective petitioner's United States citizenship. 4. Proof of the marriage of the prospective petitioner and spouse, if applicable. 5. Proof of termination of any prior marriages of the prospective petitioner and spouse or unmarried prospective petitioner, if applicable. 6. A home study completed by the appropriate state organization or licensed private adoption agency in the United States or licensed social worker with a favorable recommendation. 7. Proof that the pre-adoption requirements, if any, of the state of the orphan's proposed residence in the United States have been met if the orphan is to be adopted in the United States. And 8. A filing fee of $525 as of 2008. Step 2. Parents filed the petition I-600 at the U.S. Embassy on behalf of the prospective adoptive orphan to be recognized as an immediate relative, the petition, together with the adopted orphan's documents. The 5 documents required for submitting the I-600 form are: 1. Completed Form I-600, petition to classify orphan as an immediate relative. 2. Proof of the orphan's age. 3. Death certificate of the orphan's parents, if applicable. 4. Proof of the orphan status, for example, evidence of abandonment or proof that the orphan's sole or surviving parent cannot give the orphan proper care and has, in writing forever or irrevocably, released the orphan for emigration and adoption. 5. A final decree of adoption for the orphan. And 6. If not submitted previously in an I-600A form, the documents mentioned before in the I-600A section must also be provided with the I-600. In this case, the I-600 must be filed with the CIS office with jurisdiction over the prospective parent's residence rather than at a U.S. embassy abroad. If parents are adopting 2 or more biologically unrelated children, there will be a $525 fee for the second child as of 2008. And step 3, Parents sign Form I-600 in front of the U.S. Consul and present the last set of documents in order to receive either an immigrant IR-3 or IR-4 visa for their child. IR-3 visa means that the child was adopted with full effects in the foreign country and will be granted automatic U.S. citizenship upon entering the United States. An IR-4 visa means the child was not fully adopted in the foreign country and will have to be readopted in the United States, after which the child will become a U.S. citizen. U.S. laws require that the adopted child, regardless of age, be brought to a U.S. embassy for a personal appearance before the consular officer at the time of the interview for the immigrant visa. Here are some of the basic 20 required documents for either the IR-3 or the IR-4 visa. 1. Confirmation from the USCIS office in Washington, D.C. of an approved and valid I-600A petition. 2. Completed I-600 petition with original signatures by both adopting parents. 3. Completed immigrant visa application, Form DS-230, Parts 1 and 2, signed by one parent on behalf of the child in the presence of a consular officer. Information in the form should pertain to the child, not the adopting parents, but it should also include documents to show the consular officer that the child will not be a public charge in the United States. For example, a job letter, tax returns, bank statement, or other proof of the adopted parent or parents' assets in the U.S., meaning they can take care of the child. 5. Results of the child's immigrant visa physical examination, including a vaccination report. 6. An affidavit of acknowledgement of health problems of adopted child. Both parents' signatures should be notarized on this form. Parents should not sign this document before coming to the embassy. It must be signed under oath in the presence of a U.S. consular officer. Parents have to include all health problems that are listed in the adoption court decree and medical history of the child or children if available. 7. Affidavit of vaccinations requirement waiver, if applicable, when parents do not wish to have any vaccinations given to the child in the foreign country, but rather upon arriving home in the United States. This document must be signed under oath in the presence of a U.S. consular officer. The form may be signed by either of the adopting parents and notarized by a U.S. consular officer or U.S. notary public. This form is required only for children 10 years of age and younger. 8. An immigrant visa fee of $335 in cash, or if permitted by the U.S. Embassy in that particular country by credit card, payable at the time of the interview. 9. An original and copies of the foreign adoption decree. 10. An original and 2 copies of the new birth certificate issued in the child's new adopted name. 11. 2 copies of the court decree declaring that the child is an orphan and or unambiguously declaring that any surviving parents have no legal parental rights. If applicable, adopting parents may present 2 copies of a certificate of abandonment produced by the biological parents, the police, or the hospital. 12. 2 notarized copies of the child's pre-adoption birth certificate. 13. The original and a copy of the orphanage's medical report, medical history for the child. 14. The original and a copy of the passport for the country of origin issued in the child's new adopted name. 15. The original and a copy of each of the adopting parents' passports. 16. 2 passport-size photographs of the child with a 3/4 profile showing the right ear. U.S. embassies that issue the new machine-readable immigrant visa, MRIV, require 1 photo in 3/4 profile showing the right ear and a second one showing the frontal facial photo. Here are some additional possible requirements for the IR-4 visa. 17. A certified copy of the approved home study. 18. Evidence that the pre-adoption requirements of the adopting parent's state of residence in the United States have been met if applicable. 19. Evidence that readoption is legally possible in the parent's state of residence if applicable. And 20. A notarized statement from the parent who has not met their child that he or she intends to adopt in the United States. If you need additional information, you can listen to question and answer 1187 in this audio library. What documents do I need from the United States to adopt overseas as a U.S. citizen? Now, let's talk about the basic documents required by adoption authorities in the foreign country. This information is for general education purposes and is not legal advice. You should check at the time of your adoption for the exact documents and other pertinent details. All documents that come from the United States must be authenticated and also in legal translation. The translation is normally done in the foreign country by a certified and sworn translator. Usually, there are two levels for adoption approval in a foreign country: the National Adoption Authority and the local authority where the orphan resides. Here are the basic required documents for the National Adoption Authority in the foreign country. 1. Birth certificates for the adoptive parents. 2. Copy of U.S. passports for the adoptive parents. 3. Copy of the marriage certificate for the adoptive parents where applicable. If either applicant is divorced or widowed, a copy of the divorce decree or spouse's death certificate is also required. 4. Family photos of the prospective adoptive family. 5. Full medical evaluation report for each prospective adoptive parent from a U.S. doctor. 6. Police report for adoptive parents, which is separate from the FBI clearance needed for the I-600A approval. 7. Copy of the USCIS approval. This is Form I-171H, the letter that parents receive in the United States. 8. Employment letter for the adoptive parents. 9. Tax returns for the last 3 years. 10. Home study report conducted by a licensed adoption agency in the United States or licensed social worker. 11. Copy of home study agency or social worker's license. 12. Letters of reference from 3 individuals in the United States who know the adoptive parents. And 13. A reference letter from a pastor or community leader. The entire adoption file must be presented with an introductory letter, a petition, addressed to the proper adoption authority. It is the parent's request petition to adopt a legal orphan from that country. The above documents mentioned must be submitted together as one package and legalized with either an apostille or the appropriate legal signatures. Here are the basic required documents at the local level where the orphan resides. 1. The parent's petition application, which must include but is not limited to the full name of the adoptive parents and child, whether or not the parents want to change the child's name, his date of birth, place of birth, or to put themselves as parents on his documents, that the adoptive parents know the exact health status of the child and accept him or her as is, and other pertinent details. Number 2, copies of the adoptive parents' U.S. passports. 3. Copies of the adoptive parents' marriage license. 4. Child's consent if the child is over a certain age, usually 10 years old. 5. Copies of the child's birth certificate. 6. Copies of the child's medical records. 7. Statement of child's centralized registration with the appropriate government agency. 8. Written consent of either the birth parents and or the orphanage. Also, if applicable, death certificates of birth parents and consent of biological grandparents if the biological parents are not adults. And 9. National Adoption Authority's approval of adoption. The National Adoption Authority comes under different names in certain countries depending on the government agency in charge of adoptions.